Thank you, Your Honor. The state would call Dr. Jonathan Thompson to the stand.
You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Jonathan Thompson, Jonathan
Dr. Thompson, where do you work?
I'm an associate medical examiner for the state of Iowa.
How long have you been associate state medical examiner?
Since December of 2008.
What are some of your duties or responsibilities as an associate state medical examiner?
The primary duty of a medical examiner includes identifying the decedent, determining cause of death, which is why the person died, so that could be things like gunshot wound, stab wound, heart attack, ligature hanging, and then also determining manner of death, which is the circumstances surrounding the death. In Iowa, there's five manners of death: natural, accident, which would be like a car accident or a drug overdose, suicide, homicide, and undetermined. So, role of the medical examiner: identify the dead, determine cause of death, and determine manner of death.
Dr. Thompson, can you briefly go through your post-high school education?
I received a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Iowa. I received that in 1998. I then received a medical degree from the University of Iowa in 2002, so I am a physician. Following medical school, I did basically an on-the-job training, something called residency in the field of medicine called pathology. I did that in anatomic pathology and clinical pathology. I did that at the University of Minnesota from 2002 to 2006. And then from 2006 to 2007, I did a fellowship in a field of pathology called forensic pathology.
Are you licensed to practice medicine in any state?
Yes, I am.
In what states?
I'm licensed in Minnesota and Iowa.
And Dr. Thompson, are you board certified as a forensic pathologist?
Yes, I am.
What does it mean to be board certified?
That means I fulfilled the necessary educational requirements. I graduated from the medical school. I attended a residency program. I completed a fellowship. And then I also successfully passed an examination given by the American Board of Pathology.
May I approach him?
Yes.
Dr. Thompson, I've handed you what's been marked as State Exhibit number 19. Can you tell us what that is?
This is my resume.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of your activities?
Yes, it is.
The state would offer him to evidence State's Exhibit number 19.
Okay. 19.
Dr. Thompson, as an associate state medical examiner, you obviously conduct autopsies, is that correct?
Yes, I do.
Approximately in your career, about how many autopsies have you conducted?
I do roughly 200 autopsies a year. I've been doing this since July of 2006, so roughly 1,700 autopsies.
Is there a standard or some type of procedure you follow when you conduct an autopsy?
Yes, there is.
Can you walk the jury through that?
The body is considered evidence, so when we receive the body should be in a body bag. That body bag should be locked. That way we know that nobody has tampered with the body from the time of transport from the scene to our office in Ankeny. When I receive the body, I will take a picture of the lock just to show that the body has been secured during the transit time. I will then unbreak the lock, open up the body bag, and immediately after opening the body bag, I will take a picture of the body exactly as we receive it. The body should have the same clothing, the same personal effects, the same type of blood on the body as it was at the scene. Following photographs of the body, which I call the dirty photographs, we then will collect any DNA evidence. We will take scalp hair, fingernail clippings. If the police want a sexual assault kit, we'll do a sexual assault kit. Following collection of evidence for DNA, we will then remove the clothing, any medical intervention on the body, clean the body, and then take clean photographs. Following the clean photographs, I then document the external examination, which is simple documentation of what the outside of the body looks like. So we'll document things like hair color, eye color, height, weight, any tattoos on the body, and then obviously any type of traumatic injuries. Following the external examination, we do an internal examination where we look at the inside of the body, document any internal injuries associated with the external injuries, as well as any natural disease. And then the third component of the autopsy includes toxicology, where we look for drugs and alcohols inside the body. In certain cases, we will do x-rays. If the body is decomposed, like in this case, we will do an x-ray of the entire body. And then we also will submit microscopic sections where we take a very small piece of tissue and look at that tissue under the microscope.
So in this case, did you conduct an autopsy on Mark Koster's body?
Yes, I did.
And first of all, was I don't know if there's a normal condition, but what was the condition of Mr. Koster's body when you received it?
He was decomposed. I would call it advanced decomposition. He was decomposed to the point where identifying him visually through comparison with like an Iowa driver's license was impossible. So we had to use other means of identification.
And you said earlier that's one of your purposes as an associate state medical examiner is to identify the decedent. In this case, how were you able to identify Mark Koster?
We identified Mr. Koster through dental x-rays. We obtained an x-ray of his teeth before he died, and then we took an x-ray of his teeth in our office and compared the fillings in the two cases, and they matched, and we were able to make a scientific identification through dental x-rays.
May I approach that?
Yes.
Dr. Thompson, a candidate you has been marked as State's Exhibit number 55. Can you tell us what this is?
This is an x-ray comparing the, what are called the anti-mortem dental radiographs of the x-ray of his teeth prior to death with the post-mortem dental radiographs, which are the x-rays of his teeth after death.
The state would offer in evidence State's Exhibit number 55.
No objection. 55, received.
Permission to publish? Dr. Thompson, I have on the monitor two x-rays. If we're looking at the monitor, lower right, can you tell us what that x-ray represents?
Those are the x-rays that we took at our office. Those would include his back teeth, one of which is the molar, and then the areas of the teeth which are white are fillings present in Mr. Koster's mouth.
And then in the upper left-hand corner,
Those are the anti-mortem dental radiographs. Those were taken at the dentist's office prior to death. It compares the same teeth. And as you can see, the fillings present on the anti-mortem dental radiographs in the top left are consistent with the post-mortem fillings on the bottom right. So that is a scientific identification, and that's how we identified Mr. Costa.
so after you were able to identify Mr. Coster, is the next step then to go ahead, like you said earlier, do the external examination?
Yes, it is.
Did you follow the same protocol that you set out earlier?
Yes, I did.
Took photographs as well then?
Yes, I did.
And did you do an autopsy report?
Yes, I did.
May I approach you in there?
Yes.
Dr. Thompson, I handed you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 20. Can you tell us what this is?
This is my autopsy report on Mr. Coster. It's a total of 6 pages.
Now, is this the first autopsy report you did?
This would be the second autopsy report. The first one, the cause and manner of death was certified as undetermined. We obtained additional information later. I amended that autopsy report and changed the cause and manner of death based on that additional information.
And did that additional information include the defendant's interview by law enforcement down in Florida?
Yes, it did.
The state would offer into evidence State's Exhibit number 20.
No objection, Your Honor.
20 proceeds.
May I approach you in here?
Yes.
Dr. Thompson, prior to coming into court today, did the state ask you to select some photographs that would be helpful in your testimony concerning the manner and cause of death?
Yes, you did.
And were you able to select some photographs?
Yes, I was.
I handed you State's Exhibits 47 through 54. Are these just some of the photographs that you had taken during the autopsy?
Yes, they are.
And would these be a fair and accurate representation of what you had seen or collected during the autopsy?
Yes, it was.
The state would offer into evidence State's Exhibits 47 through 54 inclusive.
No objection,
47 through 54 received.
Dr. Thompson, start with the external examination and describe what you saw when you did the external examination of Mark Coster.
When we received the body was wrapped in blankets. There was one blanket that was completely encased the body, and then there was a second blanket which was wrapped around his legs. He was wearing a polo shirt, jeans, socks, and underwear. When we first viewed the body, it was obvious that he was fairly decomposed, what I would call advanced decomposition. His skin was dried, a term called mummified, which is like a leathery consistency of the skin. He didn't have any type of outward traumatic injuries. A significant portion of his facial features were absent. Things like the eyes, portion of the ears, some of the nose was absent.
You mentioned Mr. Coster was mummified. Does that process, how long does that take generally?
Weeks to months, probably more closer to several months. It's a condition which occurs in a dry environment. The water present in your body essentially evaporates and your skin becomes very hard and leathery.
How much did Mark weigh at the time of autopsy?
He weighed 30 pounds. He was 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed 30 pounds.
And did you have a stated age for Mark as well?
61 years old.
I'm going to show you some of the photographs you described the condition of the blanket that was on him, starting with Stacy at 47. Dr. Thompson, can you tell us what this photograph shows?
This is the photograph I took immediately after opening up the body bag. This is a quilt type of blanket that is wrapped around Mr. Coster. Mr. Coster is underneath that blanket. That blanket is wrapped around his head, upper body, and lower body. On top of the body was some type of small white pebble material.
Would that small white pebble material be consistent with cat litter?
Could be, yes.
And Stacy at 48.
This is the tan electric blanket that was wrapped around Mr. Coster's legs.
Did this appear to be consistent with a heating blanket?
He did, yes.
So the heating blanket's wrapped around his legs, the other blanket's wrapped around his head and middle section.
That's correct, yes.
Stacy at 47. I'm sorry. At 49. Tell us what this photograph shows.
This is the clothing that Mr. Coster was wearing at the time of autopsy. He's got a polo shirt on at the top of the screen. At the bottom left of the screen is men's underwear. At the bottom right of the screen are blue jeans. And then at the immediately above the blue jeans are 2 socks.
Stacy exhibit number 50. What does this photograph show?
This is a picture of some of the personal effects present on Mr. Coster at the time of autopsy. He has rusty fingernail clippers, which are at the left of the screen. Immediately to the right of the fingernail clippers is a cigarette lighter, and then at the far right of the screen is 1 penny. He also had a black pen cap on his possession as well.
Did you take a picture of Mark's body with the clothing on? You saw one with it off. Did you take one with it on as well?
Yes, I did.
Show you Stacy exhibit 54. What are we looking at? Which side of Mark's body are we looking at?
We're looking at the back of Mr. Coster's body. In this picture, he's still wearing his clothing. You can see his polo shirt, the leather tight belt, and then the jeans. At the far top right portion of the screen is the back of his head. The back of his head was absent of skin.
Then after you take the clothing off, then do you do an overall picture of how Mark's body would look without any clothing on it?
Yes, I did.
State Exhibit 51. And Dr. Thompson, what's the purpose of this photograph?
This is what I call the overall clean photographs of the body. It's just a photograph to show what the body looks like after we remove the clothing and after we clean the body up a little bit.
Were you able to make any determination by looking at Mark's body externally if there was any evident injuries to his body?
No, it's not.
Did you do any x-rays?
Yes, I did.
What was the results of the x-rays?
When we get a body like this, which is severely decomposed, we want to rule out that there's not any type of projectiles inside his body, so we x-ray the entire body. Those initial x-rays were unremarkable. We didn't find any foreign objects present inside his body.
So what's the next step then after you did the x-rays of Mark's body? What did you do next?
Following the external examination, then we do the internal examination where we look at the inside of the body. We look at all the organs from the brain down to the genital region. We will dissect those organs, trying to identify any type of natural disease, which is difficult in a case like this, because a lot of the organs are severely decomposed or even decomposed to the point that they no longer exist. We then will take small microscopic sections of those organs and look at them with a microscope.
And what was the results of the internal examination?
The internal examination was remarkable for a number of organs being absent. He also had 2 fractures of bones in the neck. There's a bone at the very top portion of your neck called the hyoid bone, and then there's a bone in the mid portion of your neck which tends to stick out in guys called the thyroid cartilage. The bones on the left side of the hyoid bone and of the thyroid cartilage were fractured. The problem that I had was trying to identify whether these were true fractures, meaning were they created around the time of his death, or when I was removing the structures of the neck, which includes structures inside the mouth, did I inadvertently fracture those 2 bones. What you like to see at an autopsy to identify them as true fractures is you like to see blood around the region. So when you fracture a bone has a blood supply, and so it bleeds. And so to identify them as a true fracture, you see the fracture, but then you also see blood adjacent to the fracture site. In this case, possibly because the body was severely decomposed, there was no blood around it. It could also have been that just because of the difficulty of removing these structures from the neck, that I inadvertently fractured those 2 bones.
So the 2 bones you're talking about is the hyoid bone, and I think I wrote down the thyroid cartilage. Is that what we call labeled adipose?
That's correct, yes.
Now, when they were fractured, you were trying to make a determination due to the Mark's condition of his body, so you did remove those?
Yes, I did.
And did you take a photograph of those?
I took a photograph of them, and then I x-rayed them as well.
I'm sure you see Exhibit 52. Apologize, the monitor's a little blurry, the picture is much more clear, but can you explain, there's 2 items on the picture on the far right, what are we looking at?
The picture on the left is the thyroid cartilage. That's also known as the Adam's apple. It's in the middle portion of your neck. If you look at the far left portion of the thyroid cartilage, there's a little fracture there. And then on the picture on the right, which is the hyoid bone, it's very difficult to see the fracture on the hyoid bone because it's still covered in tissue.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, may this witness step down to the monitor so he can show the jurors the fracture? Yes. Dr. Thompson, you could use the pointer off of the side and explain the fracture, please.
Here's the thyroid cartilage, that's the bone in the mid-neck. Here's the hyoid bone, that's the bone at the top portion of your neck. This portion of the thyroid cartilage is called the superior horn. There is a fracture site right here. Here you can see the fracture line. The hyoid bone is also a fracture on the left side, but you can't see it in this photograph because of the soft tissue that's still covering the hyoid bone. What I did after I took out these bones is then the next step is I x-rayed them, and in the x-ray it's easier to identify the fractures.
And if you would stay there a second, I'll put a court's permission publish State's Exhibit 53, which is the X-ray. Dr. Thompson, would you explain what this X-ray shows?
This x-ray is an x-ray of the thyroid cartilage at the bottom, hyoid bone at the top. This is actually the left side, even though the L is placed on the right side. The left superior horn of the thyroid cartilage is broken. You can see the fracture site right here. In the hyoid bone, the left greater cornu, which is also a fancy word for horn, is also fractured right here. You can compare the left side with the right side, and you see how the left side bends inward.
Thank you. You have a seat. We'll go back to the photograph taken Exhibit 54 for a second. Dr. Thompson, are you able to see that okay?
Yes, I can.
And if you described this before, I think we're looking at the back of Mark's head.
Yes, we are.
And there's some indications you said where there's not hair on the back of the head.
That's correct. The back portion of the scalp is absent.
When you checked them because of decomposition, are you able to tell that there were any type of fractures to Mark's head?
There were no fractures to the skull, no.
If a person gets hit in the back of the head with an object, does it mean there's always going to be a fracture?
No.
If a person's hit in the back of the head, could that also explain, would that be consistent with some of the hair being gone from the scalp?
Could be, yes.
And if a person gets hit in the back of the head or anywhere in the head, could that cause bleeding?
Can, yes.
So could you have bleeding to a person's head without any medical evidence years later?
Yes.
What was the examination when you looked at the internal examination of Mark's head? What was the results of that?
Unremarkable. The brain was severely decomposed, but there was no evidence of any type of bleeding inside the skull or any type of fractures inside the skull.
How about the condition of Mark's heart?
I'm going to refer to the autopsy report if that's all right.
Sure.
The heart weighed 40 grams. An individual who's 61 years old, that's a male, the heart would probably weigh around 400 grams, so it was significantly decomposed. It was tan, flat, and dry. Normally it's about the size of your fist in 3 dimensions, and his was flat. The coronary arteries, which are the major blood vessels that feed blood to the heart, were not identified because they were decomposed. The left ventricle and the right ventricle thickness of the walls of the heart were 0.1 centimeters in thickness, which is slightly thicker than your nail. The average left and right ventricle for a healthy heart would be 1.3 centimeters and 0.3 centimeters. So his was 0.1 centimeters in left and right, so severely decomposed.
And Dr. Thompson, do you, when you have somebody you're doing an autopsy on, do you try to see if you have any past medical history that you review as well?
Yes.
And in this case, did Mark Coster have any significant past medical history?
Not that we could identify. The only medical history we received was a trip to a dentist.
Due to Mark's condition, decomposition, are you still able to do any type of toxicology?
Yes.
And how are you able to do that if there isn't any blood left?
We can send organ tissue out. In this case, he still had a little bit of liver tissue out, so we sent the liver tissue to the toxicology lab.
And were there any drugs in Mark's body?
Yes, there was.
What drugs?
I'm going to refer again to the notes. He had caffeine, which is a substance present in coffee and pop. He had nicotine, the substance present in tobacco products. And then he had a breakdown product of nicotine called cotinine. So nicotine, cotinine, C-O-T-I-N-I-N-E. So he had nicotine and caffeine.
Just so it's clear, what's cotinine?
Cotinine is the breakdown product of nicotine. So if you smoke a cigarette, you take in nicotine into your blood, and then your body breaks that down into cotinine.
Earlier, you testified another purpose as Associate State Medical Examiner is trying to determine the cause of death. It may sound self-explanatory, but what does that mean, cause of death?
The cause of death is why the person died. So it's the initiating events which eventually leads to that person's death. Examples would be gunshot wound, stab wound, blunt force injuries due to a motor vehicle crash, drug overdose, etc.
And in this case, were you able to, within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, determine the cause of death in Mark Coster?
Yes, I was.
And what was the cause of death?
Strangulation.
I want to ask you some more questions about that. I want to go back. I forgot to ask you, are you able to determine the time of death?
No.
So explain, because if we watch TV, they always give us an exact time of death. Explain how that works.
Time of death is very difficult. Basically, the only thing you can say with 100% certainty is that Mr. Coster died sometime between when he was last seen alive and when he was found in 2012. To nail it down any further would be extremely difficult. His body is in an advanced state of decomposition, so that suggests that he didn't die a few days prior to death. He died at least several weeks prior to being found. So just identifying time of death at autopsy alone is just about impossible.
So you can't give a pinpoint date, but you know in this case it wasn't 2 days earlier.
Correct.
You mentioned a few weeks. Could it have been consistent with, it would have been 3 years earlier?
Yes.
Consistent with June of 2009?
Yes.
Now I want to go back to where I left off with you on strangulation for cause of death. Explain how, when strangulation, is cause of death, how a person dies?
Strangulation is a pressure that's exerted to the neck by another object or by another person. It causes death because it prevents oxygen from getting to the brain. Typically what happens is you either cut off blood flow to the brain or you cut off oxygen because of compression to the neck. You roughly have 2 minutes of spare oxygen. So if you go out swimming and try to hold your breath, you can hold your breath for roughly 2 minutes. It probably gets uncomfortable after 45 seconds to a minute, but 2 minutes is the rough estimate before you start to suffer brain death and before brain cells start to die. Now that's a rough estimate. Some people can hold their breath a lot longer. Some people have been known to hold it for up to 5 minutes. Some people, if you had a lot of other significant disease, like heart disease or lung disease, it could be a lot less than 2 minutes. Anytime you apply pressure to the neck, there's also the chance that you rub some carotid receptors in the neck, which could cause a sudden cardiac arrest and sudden death. There's also a possibility that any type of pressure to the windpipe or trachea could also cause a sudden cardiac arrest as well. So the 2 minutes is just a rough estimate, but so it's basically caused by lack of oxygen to the brain, which takes approximately 2 minutes for it to occur.
Is there a difference if there's manual strangulation where someone uses their hands versus uses an object to put on somebody's throat?
In a manual strangulation, the cause of death is usually due to lack of blood flow, either returning from the head or going to the head. So you have 2 major vessels on the side of your neck, your carotid artery and jugular vein. A manual strangulation usually causes compression of both those arteries, and the cause of death is due to a lack of blood flow. And a straight-edged object, the mechanism of death is likely a neck compressional asphyxia. So a straight object would have a difficult time pressing down on both vessels on the side of the neck. More likely, the straight-edged object probably compressed Mr. Coster's trachea, preventing oxygen from entering into the lungs.
If a baseball bat would have been applied to Mr. Coster's neck and pressure applied, could that have caused strangulation to Mr. Coster?
Yes.
Does it have to be, in other words, when you examine Mr. Coster, can you be as specific as to one object can only be used?
No.
Explain.
Basically, any type of straight object similar to a baseball bat would cause the same or similar autopsy findings as a baseball bat would.
I want to show you State's Exhibit 32. The bottom of this photograph, it may be difficult to see Dr. Thompson. It's been identified as a table leg. Can you see that from where you're sitting?
Yes, I can.
If a table leg would have been applied to Mr. Coster's neck, could that also lead to strangulation and the injuries you saw in this case?
Yes, I can.
If you did not have decomposition, would there be other soft tissue or tissue injuries you would look for consistent with the strangulation?
In a body that's not so decomposed, you usually have injury to the strap muscles of the neck, which are just simply the muscles of the neck. So anytime a force is applied to an area of body, you'll get bruising or bleeding to that area. So in a fresher body, the other thing you see with strangulation is bleeding to the muscles of the neck.
In this case, were you able to make those determinations
No, I was not.
due to the decomposition?
Possibly, yes.
You mentioned that it could take up to 2 minutes for strangulation in general, and that's even using an object, is that correct?
Yes.
Does it make a difference if the object is being pushed off and the person is getting air?
Yes, it does.
How does that affect it?
Theoretically, if the person is able to fight back and is able to free the asphyxiant or the object that's asphyxiating or strangling the person, theoretically, the altercation could go on indefinitely, and the rough 2-minute rule could theoretically be hours or days if the person was able to fight that long. So if the person was able to free up the object strangling them, was able to get oxygen back to their head and back into their lungs, then they could survive significantly longer.
And in this case, was there any way to make any determination besides the general rule of thumb, it could be up to 2 minutes?
No, there's not.
Could be shorter, could be longer.
Correct.
Dr. Thompson, do you have an opinion as to within a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to the manner of death in this case?
Yes, I do.
And what is your opinion?
The manner of death is homicide.
And when you say homicide, you earlier said there's 5 different ways for medical determination of manner of death.
That's correct, yes.
What's the medical definition of homicide?
Homicide simply means death at the hands of another individual. It's technically a neutral term. It does not imply right or wrong. It does not equal murder. It simply means death at the hands of another individual.
And what is the basis of your opinion in this case, coming up with the manner of death as homicide?
That's based on a combination of history, including law enforcement investigation and the interview, my physical exam findings and autopsy, and then the additional testing, specifically the toxicology.
I don't have any other questions, thank you.
Can't vote with Russ.
I guess let's start with the medical history. You stated you never provided any medical history for Mr. Costa.
The only medical history that we could find and obtain was the dental history, this trip to a dentist.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that if someone suffered from a serious mental health issue, that is medical history?
Correct.
So you didn't have any information as far as any serious mental illness for Mr. Costa?
We were unable to obtain any of that. Sometimes it's more difficult to obtain mental history as opposed to a trip to your primary care physician. For some reason, psychiatrists don't like to release that information to us.
But you can't get it, right? It's not impossible.
We can't always get it.
Can't always get it, but it is possible to get it, right?
Not in all cases, no. We have.
You're answering my question for me, Doctor, and I appreciate that. It is possible, right?
It is possible.
Okay. You went over the 5 manners of death, correct?
Yes, I did.
And one of those is natural, right?
Yes.
So if Grandma Jean is 108 years old and dies one day, it's very likely going to be natural on her cause of death, or excuse me, manner of death, correct?
That's correct, yes.
accident, you mentioned, I think your example was a car accident. Somebody crashes their car, they die as a result of the injuries. Your report comes back, it's going to probably say accident, correct?
That's correct, yes.
I think suicide is self-explanatory, correct? That's someone who ends their own life, right?
Yes, intentionally, yes.
And then you have, that's a good point. That's the only one in there where you consider any kind of intent, correct?
That's correct.
The only mental state that you ever consider in anything is in suicide, where someone has to intentionally cause their own death.
Yes, they have to intentionally perform the act, and then they have to also know that the act that they're performing is going to permanently remove them from the earth forever.
So I was up on my ladder 2 weeks ago cleaning out my gutters. I fell. Had I not been so lucky when I landed, that would have gone down as accident, correct?
Yes, it would.
I get depressed. I decide I'm going to climb up on my roof and jump off head first, and I die as a result of that. That's suicide, right?
Yes, it is.
Because of the intent, right?
Correct.
You don't get into intent on homicide, correct?
No, I do not.
You said that's a neutral term, right?
Yes, I do.
It does not equate to murder.
That's correct. It's a medical term, not a legal term.
The situation with a homicide, if you had a police officer who had a suspect and they got into a gunfight and the police officer kills the suspect, that's still going to go down as homicide, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And that's, again, as we covered, because there is no legal judgment there, there is no intent element, it is just simply a medical term, correct?
Yes, sir.
You reviewed as part of really any autopsy like this, you're going to review toxicology, correct?
Yes, I do.
And when you submitted the specimens in this case, you got some, let's call them hits, some returns for substances that were within Mr. Coster's system, correct?
Yes, I did.
That was caffeine, correct?
Yes.
And that's, I drink Diet Coke, Diet Pepper, there's caffeine in that. If I died and they checked my liver, I'm probably going to have caffeine in my system, correct?
Yes.
And then there was nicotine. I'm not a smoker, but if someone smokes, they're likely to have nicotine in their system, correct?
Yes.
And then you called the other one, it was contidine. Contidine. That's just a breakdown of the nicotine. Your body is breaking down that substance of the nicotine, correct?
Yes, it is.
Now with that toxicology, there's all kinds of things that are screened for with that test, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that includes antipsychotic medications, correct?
Yes.
There were no antipsychotic medications found in Mr. Coster's system.
No, there was none.
You said you did 2 autopsy reports in this case, correct?
Yes.
In the first one, your initial finding was undetermined, correct?
Yes, it was.
But you still knew about the break in the hyoid bone, correct?
Correct.
And you still knew about the break in the thyroid cartilage, right?
Correct.
And that was suspicious circulating strangulation, right?
Yes.
But you just didn't have enough information to sort of push it over the top to make a medical conclusion, correct?
Correct.
Because when we're talking about your opinions, we want to have opinions that are to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, correct?
Yes.
And that's what Mr. Hammerand had asked you about cause of death and manner of death. You're talking to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, right?
Correct.
There was no evidence of external injuries that you could find, correct?
No, there was none.
So you cannot say with any reasonable degree of medical certainty that any injury happened to him externally.
No, I didn't.
And that's because of the severe decomposition that we're dealing with here.
Possibly, yes.
Okay? The question Mr. Hammerand asked you about some of the scalp missing on the back of Mr. Coster's head. Did you review any reports or see any photographs of when Mr. Coster's body was removed from his basement?
No, I didn't.
Did you know that they had essentially to pry his body up from the basement floor with a shovel?
I did hear that, yes.
Is it possible that scalp could have gotten damaged when that process was happening?
Possibly, yes.
Could have gotten happen, it may have gotten damaged after he died, right?
Possibly, yes.
Lots of different possibilities there, right?
Yes.
So there's no way we can say to a reasonable degree of medical certainty what happened to cause that piece of scalp missing, right?
No, I can only document that the scalp in the back, a normal brain is about 1,500 grams, so a good portion of that brain disappeared. It's possible that if there was a small amount of blood inside the head, that it would have disappeared as well.
What if there was a large amount of blood inside the head?
It's possible it could have disappeared as well.
But it's also possible it could have disappeared, right?
Correct.
Again, we just don't know, right?
Correct.
When we talk about the idea of strangulation causing death, excuse me, there's, is it really 3 different ways that can cause death?
You can occlude the blood vessels.
You can what?
You can occlude,
Let's tell the jury what occlude means.
block off the blood vessels, so stop the blood flow to the head. You can block air through the trachea. You could rub on the receptors on the side of the neck, causing a sudden cardiac arrest. And then the 4th possibility is that pressure on the windpipe or the trachea can also cause a sudden cardiac arrest.
So, if I'm hearing you right, there's blood flow can be cut off, that's one way.
Correct.
Oxygen could be cut off, that's one way.
Yes.
Or you can have sudden cardiac arrest, correct?
Yes.
But there's 2 different ways you can have sudden cardiac arrest, right?
Yes.
One of those is this idea that you're talking about, the technical term is nasovagal reflex, correct?
Vasovagal reflex.
Okay, vasovagal. I think the court reporter might have misinterpreted that one. Say it again for me.
Vasovagal reflex. Vasovagal.
Okay. And that's the idea that you gotta, is it the vagus nerve? There's a nerve inside your throat, correct?
Yes.
And sometimes if you stimulate that, it can cause a person to have sudden death.
Yes. The vagus nerve is responsible for slowing the heart down, and if you overstimulate it, it's possible that the heart can develop an abnormal heartbeat and cause sudden death.
Then what's the other manner or method then of sudden death you said with a struggle such as this?
Pressure on the trachea can also stimulate the vagus nerve, and theoretically, any type of altercation with another person, because of the stress involved in that altercation, can also cause sudden cardiac arrest as well. So you wouldn't necessarily have to have any type of pressure to the neck, just the stress of being involved in an altercation to cause sudden arrest.
So if you and I were struggling over an object, it could be a baseball bat, a rolling pin, a broom handle, whatever it may be, one of us could die just from the exertion of the struggle, right?
Yes.
That would be the same as if you're out shoveling your walk on a winter day, correct?
Correct.
When people are in poor health, they're at greater risk for sudden cardiac arrest, correct?
Correct.
There's a difference between someone's risk for sudden cardiac death between a 58-year-old man who smokes and doesn't eat and an 18-year-old man who is well nourished and exercises daily, correct?
Yes.
The older man who smokes and doesn't eat is going to be at a greater risk for sudden cardiac arrest when they exert themselves, correct?
Yes.
You talked with Mr. Hammerhand about this idea of 2 minutes. Again, that is a very wildly speculative area to get into, correct?
Yes.
It could have been 5 seconds, correct?
Yes.
And according to your testimony, it could have been 2 days.
Correct.
And there's absolutely no way to tell, based on the information that you have, correct?
Right, not from the autopsy findings, no.
Okay. You talked about some damage to the strap muscles. Could you demonstrate to the jury where on your neck the strap muscles are?
The strap muscles are located on the sides of the neck, right in the middle, is the windpipe or the trachea. Then on both sides of the neck, you have 3 on the right, and then 3 major ones on the left.
If you were strangling someone with your hands, that's more likely to cause damage to the strap muscles as opposed to someone using a straight object, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't find any damage to the strap muscles in this case, correct?
No, I didn't.
There was no hemorrhaging of those muscles, correct?
No.
When Mr. Hammerhand asked you, it wouldn't necessarily have to be a baseball bat. It could be any straight object, correct?
Yes.
The only limit on that is our imagination, right?
Correct.
No further questions.
Yes, thank you, Aaron. Dr. Thompson, I want to talk a little bit about strangulation that was brought up in cross-examination. You were asked about different ways it could happen in situations, right?
Yes.
If somebody was having their vessels on their neck stimulated, would you expect the hyoid bone to be crushed or fractured?
No, if you were able to kind of pinpoint that area of the neck and just massage on that area, no, the bone wouldn't necessarily have to be fractured.
If a person had an object and hit the other person, causing one person to fall on the ground, then the person with the object jumped on top of that person and put the object on their throat and applied enough pressure so the person that's on the ground, that is objects on their throat, is grunting, and they hold that there for up to 2 minutes, is that strangulation consistent with lack of oxygen?
Yes, it is.
And is that also consistent with a fracture of the hyoid bone?
Yes, it is.
Would that be consistent with the fracture of the Adam's apple as well?
Yes, it would be.
Another question?
That hypothetical there's many variables there, correct?
Yes, there is.
And those are variables that you can't account for in your medical findings, correct?
No, I do not.
No further questions.
Another question?
We said Belgium.
May this witness be excused.